Hey, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in to the Hanging On to Hope podcast.
I'm Brenda J.
And I'm Karen Wonder.
And we are HangingOnToHope.org.
This podcast is intended as educational and is not psychological or medical advice. Always consult a professional when needed, and we disclaim any liability in connection with the instruction, information, or advice given. Well, hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning into the Hanging On to Hope podcast. On today's podcast, we have Julie Kenzler. She is a friend and promoter of finding hope in all things we face in life. She's the author of the book Hope Follows. She also has a show by the same name on the Holy Spirit Broadcasting Network, bringing people's hope-filled stories to 7 continents and 190 countries. Her story is also featured in the Lemonade Stand, book number 3, The Path from Sour to Sweet. We go way back to when our boys were in elementary school and when our sons became friends. So welcome to the show, Julie.
Hi, Karen. Hi, Brenda. So great to be here.
Yeah, so glad you're here.
Yeah, great to have you on.
Yes.
So part of your story is the tragic loss of your sister, Tammy, who was killed while riding her motorcycle in rural Indiana by a drunk driver. That's tragic. And the driver that hit your sister was under the influence by double the amount of legal blood alcohol content. And then at the trial, the jury ruled not guilty. That's such a terrible thing to have to endure. Do you want to start out by sharing about that?
Sure. Yes. It was in 2013. So this year will be 10 years, and it's just unbelievable. But when Tammy was actually in a really sad time in her life, she just lost her dog. And anybody who knows who has a pet and you lose them, it is such a hard thing to go through. And she had this dog for 17 years, and she just was in a really depressed state, really sad, obviously. And she wanted to go for a ride. And her first love for riding was on a horse, but she and her husband knew horses were expensive and hard to take care of. So she fell in love with riding motorcycles. Well, that day she got on her motorcycle to go to Starbucks and just open up her Bible and sit there with her coffee and read. And horribly and tragically, a man had been to 2 different bars that day we know of, and it was on a Sunday afternoon, and he did cross the line. And he struck my beautiful, sweet sister, and the bike went off to the side of the road. And just going through that whole process of losing her and hearing the news, and she was in Indiana and I'm in Arizona. We're in totally different parts of the country, but Tammy was my confidant. I mean, she would tell me when I was doing things wrong, and she could. It was a sister, best friend, kind of like a mom relationship, and then it's gone, and it's just such an empty feeling. Yeah. So we did go to court, and it was a year later, and that was when we were told through that process at the end that it was not guilty, and that was because of the blood alcohol content. The trail from the police station to a lab in Indianapolis, Indiana. The lab was also not certified. So there were just some different loopholes because it was such a small town in Indiana. We know all the jury knew that he had been drinking, and it was double the legal amount. They know that, but they had one person who was caught up on details, and that's how it went to not guilty, which was just a whole nother blow.
Yeah. Well, I can relate. I mean, my sister lives in Indiana and I'm really close with my sister. So I can't imagine that devastation of having to go through that.
Yeah, that's horrible.
Yeah, with those kind of details. Where in Indiana? Like, cause my sister's in Kokomo, which is north of Indianapolis.
Right. And I think we may have talked about this before, but Bloomington area.
Oh, okay. Okay.
South. Yeah. Beautiful area. I loved visiting her. And yeah, it's just horrific. And going through that court trial and sitting there through the whole process was just, it was like a body experience. It was mentally, spiritually, emotionally, everything just trying on you and just tearing at those parts of your body, but then physically It was just everything from your stomach to your head to your heart, everything. It was just an experience. I hate that people have to go through that, and I hated it.
Yeah.
So basically, he got a not guilty verdict because of
He
the lab
did.
work.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's crazy.
And it was crazy because the judge even asked the lead juror, looking at the different charges, because there were a series of charges, and the judge asked, I see you have left the rest of this blank. You've only answered one, not guilty. And the juror said, yes, Your Honor, that's right.
So sorry you had to go through that.
Thank you. Thank you. I do want to mention how Mothers Against Drunk Driving, MAD, I mean, I immediately turned to them because nobody I knew of had experienced a loss through driving under the influence. And so I reached out to my local chapter here in Arizona. They connected me to a woman in Indiana, and she drove an hour to sit in that courtroom with me, holding my hand while I had oils to try to calm me down and my Bible and just going in there, prayed in there. But having that woman sit with me and hold my hand, oh, you guys, that just meant so much.
Yeah, because you probably have your family with you for all of them to be there. So that is really important to have somebody, to comfort you during that time and support you.
Yeah.
Right. Yes.
Well, hi, Julie. This is Brenda J. It's nice to meet you.
Hi, Brenda. So good to visit with you and meet you. And I'm so honored to be on Hanging On to Hope.
So you were in the courtroom for the trial, like you just told us. Now that had to be really, really difficult for you. Is there anything you wanted to add about that?
Sure. Yes. I feel like one of the things that I was so surprised the most was that none of the offender's family, nobody came up to us and said, we are so sorry for your loss. Because regardless whether alcohol was involved or not, he struck my sister. And to not have anyone approach us and say anything to us was just really, that really made it harder.
Yeah, that would. I'm always afraid of that because I go to ASU a lot because my son's at ASU and there's so many kids, on bikes, and that's just one of my fears is hitting someone. So I can't imagine that.
That is very scary.
Oh,
I had witnessed that years ago. I think I was like 20 and I watched that happen right in front of me.
Oh,
yeah, it's devastating.
How was the person struck?
By a truck.
Oh my gosh. Were they
on a motorcycle?
Or on a motorcycle?
They were on a motorcycle.
Oh, well, you know very much then what, you saw that happen.
Mm-hmm. It brought that memory back when you said it. I don't even want to talk about it because I just don't. That's how devastating it was to witness that. They were in front of me. Maybe not right in front of me, but, several cars in front of me on the road.
Oh, horrible. And actually and I don't know, Karen, if we have talked about this, but my brother-in-law, Tammy's husband, then about another year later, he ended up taking his life.
Yeah, I read that in the article. Yeah.
He did. Yeah, he did take his life, and he was just so fragile. And we knew that. His best friend took his guns, took everything for quite a while. But Tom is his name. He was so close to moving to Arizona to be by us. And when you lose a loved one, their family becomes like that much more important.
Yeah.
They didn't have children, but Tom became so important to all of us. And he had such a great time with my kids. Tammy and Tom were just the best aunt and uncle. They not having kids, you can spoil your nephews and nieces. They put time into them. And, I'm living by this motto right now, choose people who choose you. And they were people who always chose people. And that was such a priority. But losing Tom that way he was just so hurting. He tried to go to a counselor. We just had to do a lot of coping with so much grief.
Yeah. I had a year. Well, I think I told you about this too, the year before my son was born, where it was called it was like my year of death because my mom died, both my grandparents. my stepdad died the same time as my mom. So it was just like all this death. But then my son, was born the next year. So
I know. And then there's that beautiful, beautiful birth that helps so much to give your focus onto something else.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Like the 1 year anniversary of my mom's death was the first day I was home from the hospital with Seth.
Wow.
And I think Seth is very sensitive, like a highly sensitive person, because I was grieving when I was pregnant with him. I mean, my whole pregnancy, I was really in a lot of grief, but.
Oh, yes. Yeah. He's a special kid you have there. All of them are.
Yeah.
Well, you shared how you struggle with hatred towards the man who took your sister. You knew you had to work toward forgiveness, and you worked through your grief through a grief share group. Was that a helpful process?
Oh, wow. Yes. And I actually remember feeling so much anger and hatred, but it was so odd because our pastors came over to see us and our family and spend a couple hours with us right after we heard the news. And what a huge blessing that was, because they helped help me calibrate where I needed to go next, because I had to start making plans to go out of town. And but I remember telling them, our pastors, I'm going to forgive this man. I mean, that's number one. I'm going to forgive him. And I don't even know. I was in shock that I don't remember how I said that, because I had to work through that process.
Something to say, but then you'd have to start taking those, but that takes time.
Yes,
From A to B that quickly.
Yes. I mean, journaling, I journaled so much. I listened to so much music, worship music that helped me, and other various songs that were just an important part of my healing journey. These songs come on and they teach you, they talk about forgiveness. I would hear a message at church, or I would read something in the Bible. And I mean, I know I've had people wrong me in life, as I'm sure you ladies have. And forgiveness is so healing. And there's one thing to forgive, one thing to forget. I know God calls us to forgive others. We want to be forgiven for when we do wrong. And so I knew, out of obedience to what God wants me to do and how he wants me to live, I knew I had to go down that journey. And yes, Grief Share, I actually did that group. I think, is it 12 weeks? Karen, you've done it?
Yeah, I went through a couple different ones. I think I went through 2 different groups because I was going to counseling, and
Mm-hmm.
it does help to be around people that understand what you're going through. I found that to be the most helpful. And then I think I told you about the book I read, because I read a lot of books on grief, and a lot of them just felt kind of like empty. And I don't know, they really didn't help. But the one book that helped the most was a book called A Grace Disguised. I think I told you about that one too, How the Soul Grows Through Loss. He actually lost his wife and his child and his mom to a drunk driver. Oh. And he's a pastor, like he's a theologian. And so he really wrestled through, like he talked about Job and just brought out, it was so real. And he just wrestled through all these verses, but I found it really comforting more than any other book. Was there any books that helped you that you were able to read?
Oh, for sure. Just like you, I described those first couple years after losing Tammy as going to college. And I have a degree. My degree is in accounting. I went back to become a teacher. But going through those 2 years of grief recovery were intense, because I took time off from work, but I read books. I went to a counselor, did the grief share. But 2 books that I like to have ready on hand to give to people who have lost a loved one. One is called Grieving the Loss of Someone You Love. And there's 2 authors with that one. And they're more like a devotional. And then the other one is Prayers of Hope for the Brokenhearted. And that's by Jill Kelly. But I have those 2 books on my website, and which is hopefollows.com. And I know we'll talk about that later. But those 2 books, I will go on Amazon, send those to people, hand them to people I know. I mean, there's even been strangers I've known, and I was able to get in touch with them again, maybe at a salon or wherever I met them. And I wanted them to have that book, because it was such a blessing to my wounded heart.
Right. I did the same thing. I bought extra copies of that, A Grace Disguised book, and would give it out to anyone because, you meet people all the time. That happens to people. I mean, it's just part of life, unfortunately, but you find, and you want to comfort, whatever comforts you, you want to see if it, maybe it will touch somebody else.
My friend Kathy Wenenberg, who's
I know Kathy.
She has 3 grieving books, I think. Grieving
Yes.
the loss of a loved one.
Yes. I need to have Kathy on my show. I've talked to her about that before.
Yeah. So those are good ones too. I'm going to get a little deep here for a second, but I'm in some therapy right now, and this podcast helps people heal from abuse. And I've been doing some EMDR for abuse. I did it before, but I wasn't quite ready. And now I'm fully ready. But what was interesting that I realized is now I have emotion again. My emotions are coming back. And I started to grieve yesterday. I started to grieve my neighborhood where I just moved from and sold my house, and losing my family, and the kids growing up. I started grieving all these things. And then I was able to process it and let it go. But what I realized was I was so afraid that I was so afraid to grieve because I thought grief was going to feel like trauma. And when you're abused, you don't ever want to feel trauma again. So that's why you completely shut your emotions down. But when I allowed myself to feel grief and let it go, it was sad and I had feelings, but it wasn't nearly as painful as trauma. And I think we're so afraid to feel emotion as abuse victims because we're so afraid to feel that feeling of trauma again. You never want to go back there. You never want to feel that again. So it was quite interesting now that I'm feeling all different kinds of emotion, and I'll start crying in the middle of the day. It's never been as bad. Any emotion that I've felt so far has never been as bad as that going through trauma. And so any abuse victims that are listening, it's important to feel it. It's important to grieve and let those emotions flow through you and then let them go. But I was just so relieved, and I'm feeling so happy that I'm actually feeling again. I was too afraid to feel because I thought it would be so painful. But the worst pain was staying in the relationship in the trauma. So I just thought I would add that in there because that was a revelation I had yesterday.
Yeah. And actually, when you feel your feelings, like they say, feel them, and then they don't stay. We think they're going to be buried in the soul of grief. But, when you feel them, then they move on. It's like they move through your body and can go to a different stage.
I think was so afraid to feel trauma again. I'm like, I don't want to ever feel trauma again. So I'm not going to feel anything again. Yeah. So yeah, it's all good. It's a good thing.
Wow, that makes so much sense. And you really hit on it when you said, you're working through this, Brenda. That's fantastic, because if you don't, it'll just stay down there. It'll stay stuck in you. And then that manifests in us physically in our bodies.
Yeah.
Right.
But when we can work through it, and now you can shout out to the world that grief and trauma, it will not consume you, it will not take you out, that you can work through it. There's hope that follows that trauma.
Yeah.
Right. Your book, Hope Follows, is about reclaiming the joy that is ours. Can you share more about your book?
Yes. Thank you for asking about it. That book was, originally I wanted to write a book about 23 years ago, and it was going to be a book for moms. I have 4 children, and I wanted to write something that encouraged young moms. Maybe a book that would help my children remember me and all the lessons I taught them in life. But I never got around to it. Being a mom, staying home, taking care of my kids, I just didn't do it. But as I began to journal through my grief recovery time, I started a blog and thought, okay, well, I'll put this into a blog. People were telling me they liked reading the blog. It encouraged them. I was funny. It was lighthearted, but also got deep at times. And so then I decided, okay, I'm going to put this into a book. And I did a lot of research on a blog to a book, book to a blog. And then in 2020, a lot of us were doing a lot of things inside our homes. But I went ahead and put all the chapters together, and my son was my amazing graphic designer. My book cover is so beautiful. It's so special and meaningful. It has leaves on it. And my sister Tammy would send me leaves. Karen, you know how wonderful leaves are.
No, I miss fall the most from, Indiana, Illinois area.
Yes.
So Jack helped you, your son, Jack, your oldest son, is he the one that helped you with it?
Right. So he designed the cover, and and put leaves on it. And it's got Tammy all through it. And it's just a book to share some stories of struggle. Each chapter is some kind of struggle or difficulty that I might have faced, and the hope that followed that tough time. I write with transparency and, as I said, with humor. It's as if we're sitting down having coffee and cookies together. I love cookies. Men and women have both appreciated it and been encouraged by it. And I'm just so thankful for that. And I kind of was worried, am I trying to do something with my sister's name and trying to use that to write a book? Well, people do not really become wealthy because of a book.
Yeah.
No.
Right. I mean, you write it. Books to me are so helpful because other people can relate, to what you're going through.
Right. And that's what I wanted, because I was able to reclaim joy again. And my son, Evan, actually had said to me one point, a couple of years into the loss, Mom, you seem so joyful lately. Like, I haven't seen you this joyful in a long time. And I said, Evan, I feel joy. I feel so happy. I felt like a kid on Christmas morning, you guys.
Oh,
I just thought, I want people to feel that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's true. You got to know that it's not going to last forever. I remember when Evan and Josiah were friends, and I don't think Josiah remembers, like, there's certain stages, that they don't remember. It's like, you don't remember that, like he doesn't remember me reading Narnia to them because he was so young. I'm like, I have to read that all over again to you.
Right. And show them pictures of when they were little at school together.
Yeah. Yeah. That was so cute because they were the same age. And yeah.
yeah. I realize my kids hardly remember any of that either. And then I see everyone else get excited about taking their kid to Disneyland when they're 6 months old. And I'm like, man, they're not going to remember.
Yeah. Guess what?
6 months old. Wow.
They're not, but you just spent a lot of money on it.
Yeah. Oh, my
I think it's because mom or dad wanted to go.
Right. Good excuse.
Probably.
So your show has the same name, Hope Follows, and you interview guests and share hard stories about various topics such as miscarriage, depression, anxiety, suicide, chronic disease, military tragedies, marriage storms, divorce, etc. And I had the pleasure of being on your show. And it's funny, I when I watched it, nobody likes to watch themselves, but when you were doing the intro, I didn't know I was on camera. So I was just like, kind of like, I don't know. I look like I'm bored out of my mind because I didn't know I was on camera during the intro. So I'm like, oh, that's lovely.
Oh, you had a wonderful episode. It was such a pleasure to have you on. And I want to have both of you ladies back on my show, Hope Follows, for sure.
Yeah, we'll have to do that. It was a good experience because I'd never really done any. We spoke at a church, but I've never done anything like that. So it is a good experience. And yeah, Brenda's going to have to do it.
I'm a little camera shy.
That's okay. There's cameras there, but there's no people, which is really nice.
Yeah. And her producer's really nice. She's like, helps you be calm and everything.
Yes, that is for
some
sure.
yoga beforehand, so you'll be nice and relaxed.
There are some ways Karen's a lot more outgoing than me. That's for sure. I act like it until you ask me to be on video or a show, and then I'm like, no.
Well, we'll be there with you. So okay. you
I know I have to do but if I tell you yes, and I have to do the show for Eric Winfield, he's been begging me to do video shows. So, okay. Yeah. So I have to say yes to him first. So,
okay.
Yeah, it'll be. Anyway, I'm not going to talk about that.
He'll be so happy.
So he will be. Yeah. Yeah. We all kind of work together. He's not a nonprofit, but like with our nonprofit and a lot of other nonprofits, we all work together.
Yeah.
It's easier if you all help each other,
Oh, for sure.
And you're all rooting for each other.
Absolutely. We all have so much to share and to encourage. And with my show, I love how I can have people come on the show. And really, there's 3 things that is the purpose of Hope Follows on Holy Spirit Broadcasting Network. And it's to share people's stories of hope that inspires others to reclaim that lost joy, and to create a platform for people to have continued healing by telling their story. I know you guys are similar in that mission and that vision.
Yeah,
right.
And then third is to inspire people to believe that they too have a Hope Follows story to be shared.
Yes, absolutely.
Right.
Hope builds upon hope.
Yeah. And it's interesting. You do a lot of similar interviews like us. We'd love to cover depression and anxiety more. We have to find some more experts on that, but you do cover a lot of similar topics. So I do like that about your show. So appreciate that.
And you mentioned your friend Eric, was it?
Yeah.
And I had a gentleman on my show, and it turned out his parents were in town, so I had them on the show as well. And his name is Alex, and he shared about his drug addiction, same thing, very similar, and how it just was devastating for his parents and how he came out of all that. And it was amazing because the next day after that show aired, and my producer contacted me and said, we have had a record number of views on this on various platforms, and it's international. And they were just so thrilled. And the funniest thing is, it was my worst hair day ever.
Well, you're having issues on the one I know because she was saying that your color or something like you needed to wear a different color, remember?
Oh, yes. No, but it was not the hair color. It was the style, lady.
Oh, really?
And you know what? That's just like Jesus, just
it's like something to humble yourself.
Yes, because it was all about Alex and his story. And,
yeah, exactly.
And that's the most important part.
Yes, absolutely.
Where can our listeners watch Hope Follows and buy your books?
Okay, on my website, hopefollows.com. I mean, that's what I'm branded. Everything is Hope Follows. On that website, there's links to Amazon, Barnes and Noble. I mean, really, you just Google Hope Follows book and you can buy it anywhere. And the show is also a podcast and a TV show. And I have those links also on hopefollows.com.
And the lemonade stand, you can buy that anywhere as well?
Yes. And the lemonade stand is my second book project. Yes. And that can be on Amazon as well and other bookstores.
That's great. That's on my bucket list too, just to write a book. So I was thinking about that the other day, just praying for the right time.
Oh, yeah.
I need time to write it, but I need to not be in fight or flight mode all the time.
I thought about writing one for about 5 minutes and then I changed my mind.
I definitely want to write one.
Why don't you guys do it together?
To different topics.
Yeah, mine, I feel like God put it on my heart because I journal a lot too, and I still have all my journals. So mine is going to be related to my journals and just how God spoke to me through them. So that's kind of the theme I've been, praying about.
Sure. And you can also do a chapter in the Lemonade Stand book because she's got number 4 coming out.
Yeah, I know, because we interviewed Dawn, and she had, I know, written her story in that as well. So that's awesome.
Yes. And I love that book, the Lemonade Stand book by Michelle Faust, because it's a project that takes about 10 months to work on. And this book is number 3, and there's 11 authors. So you meet on Zoom every month. And then we just recently went to a conference, several of us authors, and it's more like a sisterhood now.
Yeah, what a great concept.
Yeah, and it's hard when you've been abused or you've been like really bad domestic violence. With our show, part of the reason we never chose video was because we have to hide their identities. And we'll just use their first name, but it's still healing for them to tell their story, and it's healing for the people listening. Because I get so much feedback like, oh, I love listening to those and I could relate to that one, or and so it is, and it helps get rid of that fear where they'll actually do it. So yeah, with what we do, it's a little bit tougher.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. With the abuse stories anyway, but because people are afraid to talk about it. It's so devastating when you go through trauma and abuse, especially to the level that this person had and that I have had. I feel a little uncomfortable. Like I don't know if I'm going to tell my story a lot. That's why I don't go on a lot of other podcasts.
Sure.
Yeah, I may talk about abuse and what I do and a little bit of my story, but not detailed parts of it anymore. It's too traumatic.
Well, I think it is for a lot of difficult life stories because you're reliving it. And when I have people on my show, I mean, I don't want them to leave traumatized.
Right.
Because I just shared it. But it you know what? It just works out so well. And we pray before and just like we did with this show, and they share their story, and we just trust that what they shared was what people need to hear. And then when we finish the show, my guests are always feeling, well, they're a little worried how they look, but they always feel this sense, I think that was good. And I mean, I just want to be the biggest cheerleader for people who have these hard times and to let them share. And so, yes, Brenda, you share your story how you need to share it. But look at what you ladies are creating here. It's just amazing, this platform.
Yeah, I'm thankful because it is very fulfilling.
Yeah. And I do share my story on the first podcast. Did you listen to it?
Yes. Yeah. A while ago.
So that's what I thought that was kind of enough. Like I figured, and then I do little bits and pieces in each podcast because I can relate to them. But
yeah,
I mean, telling the whole thing again on other ones is a bit much.
Yeah.
And it's not necessary.
Right.
Right. Absolutely.
They can just go listen to that one.
Right.
But it's like, I don't want to just keep re-talking about it everywhere I go.
Right.
It's like,
rehashing it all.
yeah, I think that's part of healing.
Yeah.
Right. And the whole point is now we're highlighting other people's stories.
Right.
Right.
You just can have that compassion and empathy when you've been through different things. You don't really need to get into your own story, but just having empathy.
Well, the most amazing thing is like when I walked through with a domestic violence victim from beginning to end, all the way from she was in fight or flight when I met her. I said, do you want to get in my car and go to the court? We go straight to the court. She's in fight or flight the whole time, walking on, eggshells. Like literally, she was that scared. We meet with the advocate. They do the order of protection. She sees the judge. We get the guy out of her apartment with the order of protection. The police are there. I mean, the whole thing was crazy. But what was interesting is my story and what I went through was playing out while I was helping her. Like I knew exactly at every moment how to help her because what I had been through, and I wasn't afraid. That's what was the coolest thing. Yeah, I was in fight or flight for about 2 weeks after that. But when I was doing it, my story was playing out there, like the memory. Oh, I did this. I need to help you with this. We need to get you another phone. And then he was literally, they served him the order of protection and the guy has to leave the apartment. He comes walking out. The police told us to wait in the car. So she's sitting in my car. He's standing right next to us, calling her on the phone, already violating the order of protection, and her phone's ringing like in a movie. And luckily I was doing a homeless event and I had all these blankets in the car. So I grabbed a blanket and put it over top of her and told her to turn her phone off. And he didn't see us. And I'm like, police weren't there yet. So he could have done anything. You never know.
Right.
Yeah, it was crazy. And
wow.
Yeah, it was just weird how that's my story made it possible for me to help somebody, even though it just all happened. Like I couldn't have ever planned that. It just happened. And so that's what's interesting, how my story's playing out in my life. So very, very interesting. But anyway,
I was just going to tell you guys, there was at one point, I had taken my daughter to a counselor and there was the most beautiful artwork on this woman's wall. And it was huge. It was a butterfly. And the left side of the butterfly was not pretty. It was really ugly. It was just like a lot of pieces of material or stones put together. It was not attractive. I mean, it was scary. It wasn't pretty. It was ugly. And then on the right side was so beautiful. The colors, the positioning of the stones and all the material. It was just beautiful. And it's just like our stories, from hard to hope, and just that transformation.
Have you heard the story about like what a tapestry is? Seeing the threads underneath something.
Oh,
I always think about that because like you turn something underneath and you see all these threads. It's not pretty, but then you turn it over and you see, like cross stitch or something.
Right.
That concept too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're people's hope cheerleaders, ladies.
Yeah. We have that hope in common.
Yeah.
I love the word hope.
I'm so grateful that you do what you do. We appreciate you.
Oh,
I just want to thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Yeah. Thanks, Julie, for being on our podcast.
Oh, thank you so much. I really enjoyed being with you. As I said, it's an honor to be on here, ladies. Yeah. Well, we have that authority in us. We need to just like that University of Asbury and Kentucky, how they're just really going strong with worshiping and praying. Mm-hmm. You guys have heard about that, right?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. I almost went. I was going to go on Sunday morning. And then there were seats and I didn't go, and I wish I would have went, but.
Yeah. And it's spreading to other colleges, which is awesome.
Well, they shut down the Asbury one.
I was watching a video where I think it's a producer and the writer of that movie. He's like, he went to Asbury because he heard about it, and he's like, yeah, he goes, I'm seeing a lot of the same signs. So I'm just praying that it is really something, going on.
I didn't even know they moved, and I probably would have went, but that's okay.
Yeah, I'll be there next week, so I might go.
Oh, you should go. Yeah. That's right. Because your daughter
let me know
lives in
if it's
Kentucky.
still going on, and I can always fly there and go see it.
Yes. And you know what? We need to bring it here too.
Yeah,
I know.
we do. I know.
To ASU. I mean, if you ladies ever want to go over there and walk around and pray, I'd be happy to do that.
Yeah, I would love to do that because Jacob goes to school there.
Yeah, my kids went there.
Yeah, mine too. A couple of mine.
All right. Okay, well, we'll let you go, but thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you. So great spending this time with you guys. It's hard, but it was beautiful.
Yes.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing everything you shared. I know it's not easy.
You're welcome. Thanks, ladies. God bless you.
All right.
Me
Talk to you
too.
later.
Bye.
Bye.
Welcome to the show, Melanie. It's great to have you on. I said Melanie. What the heck?
Oh, you typed Melanie.
I did. Why did I type
She must
Melanie?
I was going to tell you, it says Melanie, not Julie.
I just now saw that and I even looked over it. I gave us a blooper already.
That's
Oh,
fine.
sorry.
I
That's
did
like
see. I
I
did
did
that.
that.
Because we always mess something up, and it's usually pretty funny.
Oh, that's funny.
Okay. We go, babe. Wait. Oh my gosh. Thanks for tuning in to Hanging On to Hope. Check out our website, hangingontohope.org. There are resources on there, and if you would like to donate or volunteer, you can do that through our website. We are a brand new nonprofit, so we appreciate any and all support. And we thank you for listening, and until next time, keep hanging on to hope. We are evidence that there is hope and healing for you, and our passion is to help you find it too. So thanks for tuning in.
Thanks for listening, everyone.